Yo, what up, everybody? It's about 8 in the morning out here, just north of Nevada City. We are in, I guess technically, San Juan, California. Hour 20, hour 30 minutes north of Sacramento, about 3 hours from the bay, and we're up here in the mountains. The trees are glorious, the birds are sounding off, turkeys, chickens were going off earlier. Just saw some horses. And I wanted to, I don't know, instead of fighting against things, I'd like to amplify things that excite me. And I think right now, with all the discourse and the discussions and the discord around what's happening politically, socially, legally, it's easy to think it's us versus them, or there's like a team or a side that should win or another one that should lose, or being able to categorize ourselves in ways that aren't just human. So it's easy to say, well, this person's Republican, or this person's Democrat, or this person's black, this person's white, this person's trans, this person's not. As opposed to, humanity and one humanity. And thinking about when we don't define each other by those fractioning identities in certain ways. Like, I want to celebrate the fact that I'm black, I'm a man, I like where I grew up, I like the family I'm from, I want to celebrate my identity. But it doesn't surpass my humanity. And with some of the discussions going on, as opposed to fighting or saying people are bad or something, I just want to remind folks to think about the reality of how you view morality. Like, to you, what is important outside of politics, outside of people on TV, outside of what people on social media say, outside of me and my opinions. How do you feel morally when it comes to the notion of us being responsible for other people, and knowing that we have a responsibility to other people, and that in society there's a social contract, that part of how all of this exists is that we work together in the benefit of not just ourselves, but the other people involved. And that part of our, if you are a constitutionalist, part of our constitutional rights and freedoms extend to the point at which they infringe on others and make life hard for them. So yeah, I want freedom to run a business the way I'd like. But at a certain point, we should make sure that I'm not poisoning other people in order to make money. That, to me, is a moral question. That's not politics. That's not social media. That's, do you feel like it's okay to make poison and sell it to people while you don't inform them of the potential dangers? And there are some people that say, yeah, it's business. That's how you make money. And there are other people that say, no, you shouldn't do that. I'm in the boat of you shouldn't do that. If we look at the notion of the prison industrial complex, if you've ever been to a prison or in prison or had family members in prison, if you've ever been to a prison or in prison or had family members in prison, do you really think that's the best option for how to manage quote unquote criminality? I don't. So even, doesn't matter if you're a citizen, non-citizen, you're male, female, black, white, no matter your human identity, I question the way we manage criminality. I question our justice system being accurate in how it distributes equity and justice equitably. So when I think about some of the issues that could seem political, I'm going to say building more prisons doesn't help society. Putting more people in jail doesn't help society. Outside of where your national origin is, or, there's what does it take before you can treat a human like an animal? Is it just people have to tell you they broke a law? Do they have to convince you that their identity isn't a human identity? I think there's a law being passed that could possibly ban or penalize people identifying as trans. What's happening in our society? Around the world, are people looking at Americans like, oh, you all are cool with racism, sexism, and all this stuff because you're anti-DEI? Again, you got to ask yourself a question. Outside of politics, outside of social media, am I really anti the notion that all people in the country have the same opportunity to enjoy life? How are we anti that? am I really worried that women are taking over everything and ruining the world? How? Like, what quantitative data is being used? Every time people say that the migrants are ruining America, where's the quantitative data? What happens so that if we're going to make moral decisions, we don't want to be well informed? What happens so that we can allow people who we know have not been honest with us to convince us to treat people in ways that are horrible and barbaric? And let's say our goal is national security. Do we have to behave in a way that in the past was deemed secret police, authoritarian, despotic, in order to achieve the goal? I don't believe so. Let's say the goal is to get paperwork on all the people that don't have their paperwork completed in order to be citizens. There's a process to do that. You don't have to split up families. You don't have to put people in cages. You don't have to terrorize neighborhoods. You don't have to cause conflicts between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. About some of these issues, to not necessarily project the fight and to say, like, I'm fighting these people, I'm fighting against this cause, I'm fighting against, but to have honest conversations about your morals. Do you morally think it's okay to incarcerate people in a country that has said we have a process for due process, we have a protocol for due process, we have a system that has checks and balances? Are you morally okay with that system being degraded because, fill in the blank, the person's a terrorist, because this person attacked a rich person, because this person was born in another country? Or do you uphold what the principle of, theoretically, the Constitution of the country is and say we have due process? Or do you uphold what the principle of, theoretically, the Constitution of the country is and say we have due process? If that person has violated the law or has committed the acts that are being claimed, follow the process. And I look at all this, I see nature, I see the trees. It's not about, is the EPA a corrupt government? It's like, nah, without the EPA and other protections, this forest wouldn't be here. People would have clear cut all this stuff. Without some of the conservation work and some of the government entities, for me, it's a moral decision of, like, should humans make sure that there's still woods like this when it is in conflict with corporations? It's not like individual people were clear cutting all the trees and needed them for food or shelter or something like that. It was huge multinational corporations clear cutting whole areas, making those areas difficult to live in. And you could see that in the past in Europe. It's difficult to live in. And you could see that in the past in Europe when the wool manufacturing was such a major industry. They clear cut how much of England in order to raise sheep, in order to sell wool. Well, there were ramifications environmentally. There were ramifications industrially. When you look at Europe and how it over-industrialized, poisoned its rivers, polluted the skies with the coal burning and the mills and all the metal work, they learned from that and said we shouldn't do it like that. And so it's not, to me, a political issue of Republican versus Democrat. It's a moral issue of, would you like your grandkids to have clean water to drink that comes fresh out the spring? Like, there's water running right there that I'm looking at. There are times in our history that water wasn't drinkable because they were mining in this area and the mercury and the other hard metals got into the water source. That wasn't good, so people said we shouldn't do that. Later, people said, well, the only way you can paperwork do that is to have a government agency.